Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window of Nexus Prime Station and looked out at the ships floating in space. The human ships looked small next to the alien vessels. His own ship, the UES Defiant, was one of 3 Earth warships docked at the station. The other 2 were the UES Ranger and the UES Guardian. All 3 ships had the same basic design with thick metal hulls and simple weapon systems. Jake had been to many space stations before, but Nexus Prime was different. This place was huge, bigger than any human city. Aliens from dozens of different worlds came here to trade and make deals. The station had been built by the Galactic Council long before humans learned to travel between stars. Commander Lisa Brooks walked up beside him. She was his second in command and had been with him for 5 years. Lisa was smart and tough, and Jake trusted her more than anyone. "The meeting starts in 10 minutes, Lisa said. "Are you ready for this?" Jake nodded. Today was important. Earth had joined the Galactic Council only 6 months ago. This was their first big diplomatic meeting. Representatives from 12 different alien species would be there. Jake hoped it would go well. They walked through the station's long halls. The walls were made of some kind of blue metal that seemed to glow. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved past them. Some had 4 arms, others had tentacles instead of legs. A few looked almost human, but with different colored skin or strange eyes. The meeting room was enormous. A circular table sat in the center with chairs of different sizes for the various species. Jake and Lisa took their seats next to Ambassador Helen Price, Earth's representative to the Council. Dr. Price was a smart woman who had studied alien cultures for years. "Remember," Dr. Price whispered to Jake, "we're still new here. Many of these species have been traveling space for thousands of years. Just be polite and listen." The other delegates began to arrive. Jake recognized some of them from his briefing files. The Velthari were tall and thin with gray skin and large black eyes. Their leader, Admiral Zethkar, wore a uniform covered in medals. The Hegemony Coalition sent Ambassador Kixmoth, a creature that looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and wings. Admiral Zethkar looked at Jake with what seemed like amusement. "So these are the famous humans," he said in perfect English. "I must say, I expected you to be taller." Some of the other aliens made sounds that Jake guessed was laughter. He kept his face calm and nodded politely. The meeting began with boring talk about trade routes and mining rights. Jake listened, but didn't say much. Earth was still learning how things worked in the galaxy. Then the conversation turned to military matters. "The pirates in the Outer Rim are getting bolder," said Delegate Yixnal from the Centauri Republic. "We need more patrol ships in that area." "My fleet can handle it," Admiral Zethkar said with pride. "Velthari ships are the fastest and strongest in the galaxy. We have energy shields that can stop any weapon and plasma cannons that can destroy asteroids." "What about Earth?" Ambassador Kixmoth asked, turning to look at Jake. "I hear you have warships now. Perhaps you could help with the pirate problem." Jake felt all eyes on him. "We have 3 ships here at the station," he said. "The Defiant, Ranger, and Guardian. We'd be happy to help however we can." Admiral Zethkar made a sound like a snort. "I've seen your ship specifications. Your technology is quite primitive. You still use kinetic weapons and thermal systems. Most of us stopped using such things thousands of years ago." "Kinetic weapons?" Delegate Yixnal asked. "You mean you shoot metal bullets at enemy ships?" "Among other things," Lisa said, speaking for the first time. "We also use missiles and railguns." The aliens at the table began to whisper among themselves. Some of them seemed to find this funny. "How do you expect metal bullets to work against energy shields?" Admiral Zethkar asked. "And thermal weapons? What do? Try to cook your enemies?" More laughter from around the table. Jake felt his jaw clench but kept quiet. Ambassador Kixmoth clicked his mandibles together. "Perhaps humans should focus on cargo hauling and mining. Leave the fighting to species with proper technology. Now, that's not fair, Dr. Price said. Human ships may use different technology, but they're effective. Effective against what? Admiral Zeth Carr stood up and activated a holographic display. Images of various alien warships appeared in the air above the table. Look at these vessels. Energy shields, plasma weapons, ion drives. Then look at this. The display showed a technical scan of the UES Defiant. Jake could see every detail of his ship, from the thick armor plates to the kinetic weapon arrays. This is what humans call a warship, the Admiral continued. It's basically a metal box with simple guns attached. The armor is primitive steel and titanium. The weapons are projectiles fired by chemical explosives. It's like something from our ancient history. Delegate Yixnall leaned forward. How do you even aim those weapons? Don't the projectiles take time to reach their target? We use targeting computers, Jake said. And yes, we have to calculate travel time and lead our targets. This caused even more laughter. A delegate from the Andorian Empire spoke up. We simply point our energy weapons and fire. The beam travels at light speed. No calculation needed. And what happens if you miss? Lisa asked. Miss? Admiral Zethkar seemed confused by the question. Our targeting systems are perfect. We don't miss. Everything can miss, Lisa said. What happens when your enemy moves unpredictably or uses jamming? Our shields protect us while we reposition, the Admiral replied. Really, Commander, these are basic tactics. Any military academy graduate knows this. Jake watched his crew members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Chief Engineer Roy Collins, who had come to the meeting to present technical data, looked like he wanted to say something but held back. Ambassador Kixmoth addressed Dr. Price directly. Perhaps Earth should consider purchasing proper warships from established manufacturers. The hegemony builds excellent vessels, much safer than those metal boxes you're flying. Our ships work just fine, Jake said, his voice staying level despite his growing anger. I'm sure they do, Admiral Zethkar said with a condescending smile. Against asteroids and space debris, but in real combat against proper warships, I think you would find them quite inadequate. The meeting continued for another hour, but Jake barely listened. Every time military topics came up, the aliens made jokes about human technology. They called the Defiant an antique and suggested that human tactics belonged in a museum. When the meeting finally ended, Jake and his team walked back to their docking bay in silence. The other delegates had been polite enough, but the message was clear. In their eyes, humans were children, playing with toys. That went well, Roy said sarcastically as they reached the Defiant. They think we're idiots, Lisa added. Did you see how they looked at our ship specs? Jake stopped at the airlock and turned to face his crew. What do you think? Are we really that far behind? Roy shook his head. Different doesn't mean worse. Captain, our systems work. They're just not what the aliens expect. The Admiral seemed pretty confident about those energy shields, Lisa said. Energy shields have weaknesses, Roy replied. Everything does. The question is whether we're smart enough to find them. Jake looked back toward the station where the alien ships were docked. Their sleek hulls gleamed with advanced technology. They looked fast and dangerous. Maybe we're just flying metal boxes, Jake said quietly. Sir? Lisa looked surprised. But sometimes, Jake continued with a small smile, metal boxes are exactly what you need. As they boarded the Defiant, none of them knew that Admiral Zethkar was planning something that would test exactly how effective those metal boxes could be. The next morning, Jake was drinking coffee in his quarters when Lisa knocked on his door. She entered with a serious look on her face. Admiral Zethkar wants to see you, she said. He's in conference room 7 with some of the other military commanders. Jake set down his cup. What does he want? I don't know, but it doesn't sound friendly. Ambassador Kixmoth is there too, along with Fleet Commander Nixavara from the Hegemony. They walked through the station together. Jake noticed more aliens. than usual, staring at them as they passed. Word about yesterday's meeting had spread quickly. Conference Room 7 was smaller than the main assembly hall. Admiral Zethkar sat at the head of the table with 3 other alien officers. When Jake and Lisa entered, all conversation stopped. "Ah, Captain Morrison," the Admiral said, standing up. "Please sit down. We have a proposition for you." Jake took a seat across from the aliens. Lisa sat beside him, her hand resting near her sidearm out of habit. "Yesterday's discussion got me thinking," Admiral Zethkar continued. "Your people are new to galactic warfare. Perhaps you would benefit from some practical education." "What kind of education?" Jake asked. Fleet Commander Nixavara leaned forward. She was a hegemony officer with blue skin and silver eyes. "A training exercise. A mock battle to help you understand modern space combat." "We're proposing a demonstration," Ambassador Kixmoth added. "Your 3 ships against a small fleet of ours. Non-lethal weapons only, of course. Think of it as a learning experience." Jake felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't a friendly offer. It was a challenge designed to embarrass Earth in front of the entire Galactic Council. "How many ships?" Lisa asked. "Nothing too overwhelming," Admiral Zethkar said with a smile. "Perhaps 4 fleets. 12 ships total. All modern vessels with proper shielding and weapons." 12 against 3, Jake said. "Those don't seem like fair odds." "Oh, but you have such confidence in human ingenuity," Fleet Commander Nixavara said mockingly. "Surely numbers don't matter when you have superior tactics." Jake realized he was trapped. If he refused, everyone would think humans were cowards. If he accepted, his 3 ships would be humiliated in front of the entire galaxy. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow," Admiral Zethkar said. "In the asteroid belt near this station, perfect training ground. Lots of cover, space to maneuver. The whole Council will be watching from observation ships." "And if we win?" Lisa asked. The aliens looked at each other and made those laughing sounds again. "If you win," Ambassador Kixmoth said, "then I suppose we'll all have learned something about underestimating humans. And if we lose, then you'll have learned something about modern warfare," Admiral Zethkar replied. "Either way, it's educational." Jake stood up. "I need to discuss this with my crew." "Of course. Take your time. We'll be here." Jake and Lisa left the conference room and walked quickly back to the docking bay. The other human ships were berthed nearby, and Jake called for an immediate meeting of all 3 captains. Captain Amy Chen of the UES Ranger was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick reflexes. She had been a fighter pilot before joining the Deep Space Fleet. Captain Nick Taylor commanded the UES Guardian and was known for his defensive tactics and careful planning. They gathered in the Defiance briefing room, along with the senior officers from all 3 ships. Jake explained the situation, while Roy Collins pulled up tactical displays of the alien vessels they would face. 12 ships, Amy said, shaking her head. "And they all have energy shields. Plus plasma weapons, ion drives, and targeting systems that supposedly never miss," Nick added. Chief Engineer Roy Collins stood up and activated the holographic display. "I've been studying their technology since we arrived. The Velthari use standard deflector shields powered by fusion reactors. The hegemony ships have layered energy barriers. The Centauri vessels rely on adaptive shielding that changes frequency." "What about weaknesses?" Jake asked. "All energy shields have the same basic problem," Roy said. "They require massive amounts of power. The more energy they block, the more power they consume. Eventually, something has to give." Lieutenant Ben Parker, the Defiance weapons officer, looked up from his tablet. "What about their plasma weapons? How do they work?" "Superheated gas contained in magnetic fields," Roy explained. "Very effective against most targets, but they have limited range and the plasma disperses over distance." Amy leaned back in her chair. "So we stay far away and pelt them with kinetic rounds. If we can hit them," Nick said. "Their ships are fast and maneuverable. Then we make them come to us," Lisa suggested. Use the asteroids for cover. Jake listened to his officers discuss tactics. These were good people, experienced and brave. But they were facing technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything Earth had. "What do you think, Roy?" Jake asked. "Can we actually win this?" The engineer was quiet for a long moment. "Their technology is impressive," he said finally, "but it's also predictable. They've been using the same basic systems for centuries. They know what works, so they stick with it. And that's bad because they've forgotten how to innovate. They see our kinetic weapons and thermal systems as primitive. But maybe primitive is just another word for different." Dr. Helen Price entered the briefing room. She had been listening from the doorway. "I've been analyzing their tactical databases," she said. "Every major battle in the last 1,000 years followed the same pattern. Ships close to medium range, trade plasma fire until someone's shields fail, then board or destroy the disabled vessel. Like a boxing match," Amy said. "Stand in the ring and punch each other until someone falls down." "Exactly. They don't expect unconventional tactics because no one uses them anymore." Jake looked around the table at his people. They were outnumbered and outgunned, facing species that had been fighting space battles since before humans discovered agriculture. But they had one advantage the aliens didn't expect. "All right," Jake said. "We accept their challenge, but we do this our way." Over the next 18 hours, the 3 human ships prepared for battle. Roy worked with the other engineers to modify their weapons and defensive systems. Amy and Nick developed new tactics based on Earth's military history. Lisa coordinated with the weapons officers to maximize their unconventional arsenal. The most important work happened in engineering. Roy had an idea that might give them a fighting chance, but it required modifications that had never been tried before. "Thermal beam arrays," he explained to Jake as they watched technicians install new equipment. "We take our standard heating systems and focus them into concentrated beams." "For what?" "Think of it like a giant magnifying glass focusing sunlight, except instead of burning ants, we're going to overheat their shields." "Will it work?" Roy shrugged. "No idea. But it's better than trying to outshoot 12 plasma cannons with kinetic rounds." News of the upcoming battle spread through Nexus Prime like wildfire. Aliens from dozens of species made bets on how quickly the humans would surrender. Most gave them less than 10 minutes. Admiral Zethkar held a press conference where he explained that this was purely educational. "The humans are brave, but inexperienced," he told the reporters. "This exercise will help them understand their place in the galactic military hierarchy." Ambassador Kixmoth was less diplomatic. "It will be amusing to watch them try. Like children playing with toy soldiers." On the morning of the battle, Jake stood on the Defiance Bridge and looked out at the asteroid field. Chunks of rock drifted slowly through space, some as small as cars and others as big as buildings. It would be a dangerous place to fight, but Jake hoped the asteroids would give them some advantage. "All ships report ready," Lisa said from her. "Station! Enemy fleet is approaching," Ben announced. 12 ships in formation." Jake activated the communication system. "Ranger, Guardian, this is Defiant. Remember the plan. Stay flexible, stay unpredictable, and don't give them what they expect." "Copy that, Defiant," Amy's voice crackled over the comm. "Guardian standing by," Nick added. The alien fleet appeared on their screens. 12 sleek warships arranged in a perfect attack formation. Their hulls gleamed with advanced materials, and their weapons were already charging. Admiral Zethkar's voice came over the open channel that all the observation ships could hear. "Human vessels, this is Admiral Zethkar. Are you ready to begin?" "Your education?" Jake keyed his microphone. "This is Captain Morrison. We're ready when you are." "Excellent. Begin when you're prepared. Try not to surrender too quickly. The audience wants to see a proper demonstration." Jake looked at Lisa and smiled grimly. "Well, let's give them a demonstration they won't forget." The 12 alien ships moved forward in perfect formation. Admiral Zethkar's flagship led the group, followed by 3 other Velthari vessels. The hegemony contributed 4 ships with gleaming blue hulls, while the Centauri Republic and Andorian Empire each sent 2 vessels. Jake watched them approach on the main screen. The alien ships looked like works of art compared to the boxy human vessels. Their hulls curved gracefully and energy shields shimmered around them like soap bubbles. "They're staying in formation," Lisa observed from her tactical station. "Just like Dr. Price said they would." "Distance to target?" Jake asked. 200,000 kilometers and closing," Ben replied. "They're coming straight at us." "All ships, execute Plan Alpha," Jake ordered. The 3 human vessels immediately broke formation and scattered in different directions. The Ranger dove toward a large asteroid cluster, while the Guardian climbed above the plane of the field. The Defiant accelerated straight ahead, but at an angle that would take it past the alien fleet rather than through it. On the observation, ships surrounding the battle zone, alien dignitaries watched with amusement. They had expected the humans to either run away or try to match their formation flying. Admiral Zethkar opened a communication channel to his fleet. "They're splitting up. Probably panic. Blue Squadron, pursue the ship diving into the asteroids. Red Squadron, take the one climbing above us. I'll handle the one coming toward us directly." The alien fleet broke apart smoothly, each group moving to engage its target. Their ships accelerated with impressive speed, ion drives leaving blue trails behind them. Captain Amy Chen gripped her command chair as the Ranger weaved between asteroids. 4 alien ships followed her, their sleek hulls easily avoiding the floating rocks. "They're gaining on us," her tactical officer reported. "Good," Amy said with a grin. "Let them get close." The pursuing ships opened fire with their plasma weapons. Bright green bolts of superheated gas streaked through space, but they had to be careful not to hit the asteroids. Amy used this to her advantage, staying close to the rocky obstacles. One plasma bolt clipped the Ranger's rear section, but the thick armor absorbed most of the damage. "Shields at 90%, the tactical officer reported. "Wait for it," Amy said, watching her screens carefully. The alien ships moved closer, trying to get a clear shot. When they were only 50,000 kilometers away, Amy triggered her. "Surprise! Fire torpedoes!" The Ranger launched 6 nuclear torpedoes from tubes hidden in its hull. The aliens had studied human ship specifications, but these modifications weren't in any database. The lead alien ship tried to evade, but the torpedo's guidance system locked onto its heat signature. The nuclear warhead detonated against the ship's energy shields, creating a brilliant flash of light. When the radiation cleared, the alien vessel was still intact, but its shields flickered and sparked. "Their shields are down to 60%, Amy's tactical officer reported with excitement. The alien captain had never seen a nuclear weapon before. Most civilized species had abandoned such primitive devices millennia ago. He was still trying to understand what had happened when the Ranger disappeared behind a large asteroid. Meanwhile, Captain Nick Taylor was leading 4 ships on a chase above the asteroid field. The Guardian was slower than its pursuers, but Nick had chosen his route carefully. "Sir, they're closing in," his navigator warned. "Right on schedule," Nick replied calmly. The 4 alien ships spread out in attack formation and began firing. Their plasma weapons lit up space with deadly energy, but Nick had positioned his ship just outside their optimal range. The plasma dispersed before reaching the Guardian, causing only minor damage. "Return fire," Nick ordered. The Guardian's rail. Guns opened up, sending streams of tungsten rounds toward the alien ships. The projectiles moved much slower than energy weapons, giving the aliens plenty of time to evade, or so they thought. What the aliens didn't know was that each tungsten round was followed by 3 smaller penetrator rounds with different trajectories. When the lead alien ship dodged the primary projectile, it flew directly into the path of a penetrator. The small round punched through the ship's energy shield like it wasn't there and embedded itself in the hull. The alien captain stared at his damage reports in confusion. Energy shields were supposed to stop all projectiles. "How did that get through?" he demanded. His tactical officer was equally puzzled. "Unknown, sir. The projectile mass was too small to register on our sensors until it hit us." Back near the center of the battle, Jake faced Admiral Zethkar and 3 other Velthari ships. The alien vessels had formed a wall of fire, their plasma weapons creating a deadly barrier in space. "All stop," Jake ordered. "Let them come to us." Lisa looked at him with concern. "Sir, we're sitting ducks out here." "Trust me," Jake said, watching the range indicators on his screen. The Velthari ships closed to optimal firing range and unleashed everything they had. Dozens of plasma bolts streaked toward the Defiant, more firepower than any human ship had ever faced. The plasma hit the Defiant's hull and exploded in brilliant flashes. The thick armor plating absorbed some of the energy, but several bolts burned through to the inner sections. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, Roy Collins reported from engineering. "Damage control teams responding." "Shields?" Jake asked. "We don't have energy shields, remember?" Lisa said. "Just armor and prayers." "Then let's give them something to pray about," Jake replied. "Ben, target their lead ship, full spread." Lieutenant Ben Parker had been waiting for this moment. His targeting computer had been tracking the alien ships for the past 5 minutes, calculating their movement patterns and predicting their next positions. "Firing," he announced. The Defiant's main weapons opened fire. Railguns sent streams of tungsten rounds downrange, while missile tubes launched a variety of projectiles. Some were standard explosive warheads, others carried electromagnetic pulse generators, and a few contained clouds of metallic chaff designed to confuse sensors. "Admiral," Zethkar watched the incoming projectiles with amusement. Human weapons were so slow that his helmsman could literally steer around them. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered casually. His flagship began to turn, easily avoiding the obvious threats. But Jake had learned something about alien tactics during his time at Nexus Prime. They were predictable. The first wave of missiles and railgun rounds was just a distraction. While the alien ship maneuvered to avoid them, it moved directly into the path of Ben's real attack. A spread of armor-piercing penetrators had been fired on a delayed trajectory, timed to arrive just as the alien ship completed its evasive maneuver. The small projectiles punched through the flagship's energy shield and embedded themselves in the hull. "Impossible!" Admiral Zethkar shouted as damage reports flooded his bridge. "How did they calculate our evasion pattern?" "Sir," his tactical officer said nervously, "I think they fired those rounds before we even started moving." The Admiral stared at the human ship on his screen. These primitive creatures had somehow predicted his exact movements and fired their weapons accordingly. It was like they could see the future. What he didn't understand was that humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had developed tactics for every situation, including how to predict enemy movement patterns. Ben Parker had studied the alien ship's previous maneuvers and identified a pattern. When faced with incoming fire from the left, Admiral Zethkar always turned right and climbed. It was a logical response that worked well against energy weapons, but it made him predictable to someone who thought like a human tactician. The battle continued for another 10 minutes. Both sides scored hits, but the results were not what anyone had expected. The human ships were taking damage, but they kept fighting. More importantly, they were causing damage to the supposedly superior alien vessels. Amy Chen had lured her pursuers into an asteroid cluster where their superior speed worked against them. 2 of the alien ships had collided with rocks while trying to maintain pursuit at high velocity. Nick Taylor had turned the Guardian into a mobile fortress, using its thick armor to absorb punishment while his weapons methodically targeted enemy weak points. One hegemony ship was already retreating with a damaged drive system. Jake's battle with Admiral Zethkar had become a deadly game of chess. Each side tried to outthink the other, but the human captain had advantages the alien didn't. Expect. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and adaptation, while the Velthari relied on proven tactics that had worked for centuries. The tide turned when Roy Collins activated his secret weapon. Thermal arrays online. he reported from engineering. Ready to fire? Jake smiled grimly. Target the Admiral's ship. Let's see how well those shields handle some heat. The Defiant's new thermal beam arrays focused their energy on Admiral Zethkar's flagship. The concentrated heat didn't look like much on the view screen, just a slight shimmer in space, but the effects were immediate. Sir, the Velthari tactical officer reported with growing alarm. Our shields are experiencing thermal buildup, internal temperature rising. Admiral Zethkar frowned. Thermal buildup? That's impossible. Our cooling systems can handle any heat. Load. Not this much, sir. The humans are focusing concentrated thermal energy directly onto our shield generators. The heat is building up faster than we can dissipate it. For the first time since the battle began, Admiral Zethkar felt a touch of concern. How the retreating alien ships regrouped at a safe distance from the asteroid field. Admiral Zethkar's damaged flagship limped along behind the others, its hull scarred from kinetic impacts and its shield generators completely offline. On his bridge, the Admiral stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 3 of his ships were disabled, drifting helplessly among the asteroids. The remaining 9 vessels had taken various amounts of damage from weapons that shouldn't have been able to harm them. "Status report," he demanded. His tactical officer looked nervous as he read from his tablet. The Retribution has lost main power and is venting atmosphere. The Dominion took a direct hit to its engine section and can't maneuver. The swift strike hit an asteroid while evading human fire and has multiple hull breaches. And our ships. Shield. Generators are offline across the fleet. The thermal weapons did something to our cooling systems that we don't understand. Engineering reports that the heat buildup was unlike anything they've seen before. Admiral Zethkar slammed his fist on his command chair. How had this happened? His fleet had every technological advantage. Better shields, faster ships, more powerful weapons. Yet somehow these primitive humans had outfought them, using nothing but metal projectiles and focused heat. Fleet Commander Nick Savara's voice came over the communication system. "Admiral, my ships are reporting similar problems. Our shields are failing under sustained thermal attack. The humans are using some kind of new weapon," Admiral Zethkar replied. "Something not in their technical specifications." "Or," came a new voice, "they're using their old weapons in ways we never expected." The Admiral turned to see Captain Veltar, one of his most experienced officers, studying the sensor readings from the battle. "Explain," Admiral Zethkar ordered. "Sir, I've been analyzing their thermal beam arrays. They're not new weapons at all. They're standard ship heating systems modified to focus their output into concentrated beams." "Heating systems?" The Admiral was incredulous. "They're attacking us. With the equipment they use to warm their ships?" "Yes, sir. But they've focused the thermal energy to create heat buildup that our shields can't handle. Our defensive systems were designed to deflect energy weapons and stop kinetic projectiles. No one ever considered that an enemy might try to cook us." Meanwhile, aboard the human ships, the mood was cautiously optimistic. They had surprised the aliens and gained a tactical advantage, but the battle was far from over. Roy Collins worked frantically in the Defiant's engine room, trying to keep the thermal arrays operational. The modified heating systems were never designed for this kind of use, and they were beginning to overheat. "How much longer can we maintain thermal output?" Jake asked over the comm system. "Maybe 10 more minutes," Roy replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "After that, we'll need to shut down for cooling cycle or risk damaging our own systems." Dr. Helen Price monitored the battle from the ship's science station. She had been tracking the alien fleet's movements and noticed something interesting. "Captain," she called out, "the enemy ships are maintaining distance, but they're not retreating. I think they're regrouping for another attack." Lisa checked her tactical display. "Confirmed. They're forming up again, but staying well outside our thermal weapon range." Jake studied the tactical situation. The aliens had learned from their first encounter. They would be more careful now, more unpredictable. The humans had used up their element of surprise. "All ships, this is Morrison. Status report." Amy Chen's voice crackled over the comm. Ranger here. We're down to 60%. Armor integrity, and we've used most of our torpedoes, but we're still fighting. Guardian reporting, Nick Taylor added. Minor damage to our railgun systems, but we're operational. That thermal array idea is working better than we hoped. Copy that, Jake replied. Roy, how are our modifications? Holding up? The thermal beams are effective, but we can't maintain this power output much longer. And, sir, I've been monitoring the alien communications. They're adapting to our tactics. Jake wasn't surprised. These were experienced military commanders who had been fighting space battles for centuries. They would learn from their mistakes. Quickly. What are they doing differently? They're staying at long range where our thermal weapons can't reach them effectively, and they're using rotating shield frequencies to dissipate heat buildup. On the alien flagship, Admiral Zethkar was implementing exactly those changes. He had called a tactical conference with his remaining ship commanders using secure communications. The humans have surprised us once, he said to the holographic images of his captains. It won't happen again. We know their capabilities now. Fleet Commander Nix Vara nodded agreement. Their thermal weapons have limited range. If we maintain distance and use long-range plasma bombardment, they can't touch us. What about their kinetic weapons? Asked Captain Yixdal of the Centauri forces. Primitive projectiles, Admiral Zethkar replied dismissively. We can evade them easily at long range. The real threat is those thermal beams. Stay outside their effective range and pound them with plasma fire. Sir, Captain Veltar interrupted, I recommend caution. These humans have already proven they can use familiar technology in unexpected ways. They may have other surprises. Admiral Zethkar's expression darkened. They caught us off guard with a clever trick. That's all. In a straight fight with proper tactics, superior technology always wins. The alien fleet began its second attack 20 minutes later. This time they approached in a wide formation, staying well outside thermal weapon range. Their plasma cannons began firing at maximum distance, sending streams of superheated gas toward the human ships. Jake watched the incoming fire on his tactical display. The aliens were being much more cautious now, using their range advantage, to stay safe while wearing down the human vessels. They're learning, Lisa observed. So are we, Jake replied. Amy, Nick, execute Plan Beta. The three human ships began moving in seemingly random patterns, using the asteroids for cover and making themselves difficult targets. But their movements weren't random at all. They were following a carefully planned sequence designed to draw the alien fleet into a trap. Roy Collins monitored his thermal arrays and noticed something the aliens had missed. Captain, their shield modifications are working, but they're using more power to maintain the rotating frequencies. How much more power? About 30% increase in energy consumption. Their fusion reactors are working harder to maintain shields and weapons simultaneously. Jake smiled grimly. The aliens thought they had solved the thermal weapon problem, but they had created a new weakness in the process. Ben, target the lead ships with sustained thermal bombardment. Don't try to penetrate their shields. Just keep painting them with heat. Sir, you said their modifications would protect them, Ben said, confused. Trust me, just keep those beams. Focused on their shield generators. For the next 10 minutes, the battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The alien ships maintained their distance and poured plasma fire into the asteroid field, while the human vessels darted between rocks and maintained steady thermal bombardment. The aliens began to notice problems 15 minutes into their second attack. Ships that had been firing continuously were reporting power fluctuations. Their weapon systems were drawing more energy than expected, and their reactors were running hot. Sir, the tactical officer on Admiral Zethkar's flagship reported, we're experiencing power distribution issues. The shield modifications are using more energy than anticipated. Can we maintain both shields and weapons? Yes, sir, but not indefinitely. Our reactors are operating at 95% capacity. Admiral Zethkar frowned. This was supposed to be a simple demonstration of alien superiority. Instead, it had become a grinding battle of attrition against opponents who refused to follow conventional tactics. The situation got worse when Captain Amy Chen executed her part of Plan Beta. The Ranger had been playing a dangerous game, using asteroids for cover while drawing plasma fire from 4 alien ships. Now she revealed why. Thermal mines activated, she reported over the comm. During the first phase of the battle, the Ranger had deployed small devices throughout the asteroid field. The aliens had assumed they were standard sensor buoys or communication relays. They were actually thermal projection units, modified versions of the ship's heating systems. When Amy activated them, dozens of thermal beams suddenly converged on the alien ships from multiple directions. The aliens found themselves taking concentrated heat from sources they couldn't see or target effectively. "What are those things?" Fleet Commander Nixavara demanded as her ship's shields began overloading from multiple thermal sources. "Unknown devices hidden among the asteroids," her tactical officer replied. "They're projecting thermal energy from concealed positions." The alien fleet was now caught in a crossfire of thermal beams from both the human ships and the hidden projectors. Their modified shields were consuming enormous amounts of power, trying to dissipate heat from multiple angles. One by one, alien ships began experiencing cascade failures. Shields would fail, followed immediately by reactor overloads as the power. Systems tried to compensate for the sudden loss of protection. The first ship to go was a hegemony vessel that had been. Admiral Zethkar stared at his tactical display as another of his ships retreated with critical systems failing. The Velthari cruiser Conquest was limping away from the battle zone, its hull plates glowing red-hot from thermal exposure and its reactor barely stable. "Sir," his communications officer said nervously, "Captain Kelvar is requesting immediate assistance. His ship is experiencing cascading system failures." "How many ships have we lost?" the Admiral asked, his voice barely controlled. "3 destroyed. Or disabled. 4 more retreating with critical damage. The humans still have all 3 vessels operational." Admiral Zethkar closed his eyes. In his 60 years of military service, he had never lost a battle, much less to a species that had only joined the galactic community 6 months ago. The implications were staggering. Fleet Commander Nixavara appeared on his communication screen, her blue skin pale with stress. "Admiral, my ships can't maintain this engagement. The thermal weapons are overloading our power systems faster than we can compensate." "I'm aware of the situation," Admiral Zethkar replied curtly. "Sir, with respect, we need to consider surrender. These humans have tactics and weapons we don't understand." The word surrender hung in the air like a curse. Around the battle zone, observation ships filled with diplomats and military attachés from dozens of species were watching the impossible unfold. The mighty Velthari fleet, pride of the galactic military, was being defeated by 3 human vessels using primitive technology. On the Defiance Bridge, Jake watched the alien fleet struggle against his thermal attack. Several enemy ships had pulled back to minimum safe distance, their crews working frantically to repair overloaded systems. "Status of our thermal arrays?" Jake asked Roy over the comm. "We're running hot, Captain," Roy replied from engineering. "The systems were never designed for sustained operation at these power levels. We need to cycle down soon or risk permanent damage." Lisa studied her tactical display. "The aliens are regrouping again. Looks like they're trying to coordinate their remaining ships for one final push." "How many do they have left?" 7 ships still operational, but several are showing signs of damage. Their formation is ragged, and they're not maintaining proper spacing. Dr. Helen Price looked up from her science station. "Captain, I'm detecting increased energy signatures from the alien vessels. I think they're overloading their reactors to compensate for the power drain from their shields." Jake nodded. The aliens were pushing their technology to its limits, trying to overcome the human thermal weapons through brute force. It was a dangerous gamble that could backfire catastrophically. All ships, this is Morrison, Jake announced over the comm. The aliens are going all in for their final attack. They're going to throw everything they have at us. Understood, Amy Chen replied from the Ranger. We're ready. Guardians standing by, Nick Taylor added. The 7 remaining alien ships began their approach in a tight formation. Every weapon was charged and ready, their shields reinforced to maximum strength despite the enormous power drain. Admiral Zethkar had decided that if he was going to lose this battle, he would at least take some humans with him. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead human vessel, the Admiral ordered. Maximum power to weapons. Ignore defensive systems if necessary. It was a desperate move that violated basic tactical doctrine, but Admiral Zethkar was beyond caring about doctrine. His reputation and the reputation of his entire species depended on salvaging something from this disaster. The alien ships opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts filled space as the 7 vessels poured their remaining energy into one massive bombardment. The Defiant found itself at the center of a firestorm that would have vaporized most ships instantly, but the Defiant wasn't most ships. Its thick armor plating, designed to withstand the harsh conditions of deep space exploration, absorbed hit after hit. Plasma bolts that should have penetrated the hull instead spread across the surface, dissipating their energy across the ships. Massive bulk. Hull temperature rising, Roy reported as alarms sounded throughout the ship. Armor is holding, but we're taking damage to internal systems. Return fire, Jake ordered calmly. Ben Parker had been waiting for this moment. While the alien ships had committed everything to their attack, they had made themselves vulnerable. Their shields were fluctuating under the power drain, and their tight formation made them perfect targets. The Defiant's weapons opened up at point-blank range. Railguns sent streams of tungsten rounds into the alien formation while the thermal arrays focused their remaining power on the enemy shield generators. But Jake had one more surprise for the aliens. Amy, Nick, execute Plan Gamma, he ordered. The Ranger and Guardian, which had been hanging back during the alien bombardment, suddenly accelerated toward the enemy formation. But they weren't attacking directly. Instead, they were positioning themselves for something the aliens had never seen before. Kinetic ramming speed, Amy announced with fierce joy in her voice. The human ships had thick, reinforced hulls designed to handle asteroid impacts and other hazards of deep space. The aliens had elegant, streamlined vessels built for speed and efficiency. In a collision between the two designs, there was no question which would survive. Admiral Zethkar watched in horror as the human vessels bore down on his formation like ancient battleships. His ships were fast and maneuverable, but they had expended most of their power on weapons and shields. They couldn't accelerate quickly enough to avoid the oncoming human vessels. "Evasive maneuvers!" he screamed into his communicator. "All ships scatter!" But it was too late. The Ranger smashed into a hegemony cruiser at full velocity, its reinforced prow crushing the alien ship's delicate hull like an eggshell. The Guardian clipped 2 more vessels as it passed through the formation, its thick armor barely scratched while the alien ship spun away with massive structural damage. The alien formation collapsed into chaos. Ships collided with each other as they tried to evade the human vessels, while others suffered complete power failures as their overloaded reactors finally gave up. Admiral Zethkar's flagship was one of the last vessels still fighting, but even it was showing signs of critical damage. The thermal weapons had finally overwhelmed his shield generators, and his hull was beginning to buckle from heat stress. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we have to surrender. If we continue this battle, we'll lose the ship." The Admiral looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good officers who had served with honor for decades. He had led them into this disaster through his own arrogance and pride. "Open a channel to the human flagship," he said finally. Jake was surprised when Admiral Zethkar's face appeared on his main screen. The alien officer looked defeated, his uniform torn and his bridge filled with smoke. Captain Morrison, the Admiral said formally, I am prepared to discuss terms. Terms? Jake asked. Surrender terms, Admiral Zethkar clarified, the words clearly difficult for him to speak. The Velthari fleet yields to Earth vessels. We request safe passage for our damaged ships and crews. A hush fell over the Defiance bridge. They had actually done it. 3 human ships had defeated 12 alien vessels in open combat. Surrender accepted, Jake said simply. Withdraw your ships to minimum safe distance and tend to your wounded. This exercise is over. Admiral Zethkar nodded stiffly and cut the communication. Around the battle zone, the observation ships were in chaos as diplomats and military observers tried to process what they had just witnessed. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Within hours, reports of the human victory were spreading to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Species that had dismissed Earth as a minor power were suddenly reevaluating their assessments. Back at Nexus Prime Station, Jake found himself surrounded by alien diplomats who wanted to discuss everything from trade agreements to military alliances. Ambassador Kixmoth, who had suggested humans should stick to cargo hauling, now spoke respectfully about Earth's unique tactical perspectives. Your thermal weapons were most innovative, he said during a formal reception. We would be interested in discussing technology exchange programs. Jake smiled politely but said nothing. The aliens still didn't understand that the humans hadn't won through superior technology. They had won through superior thinking. Dr. Helen Price joined Jake at the observation window where he was watching repair crews working on the damaged alien ships. The Council wants to offer Earth a permanent seat on the Military Advisory Committee, she said. They're also asking if we'd be willing to help develop new tactical doctrines for the Galactic Defense Forces. 6 months ago, they thought we were primitives, Jake observed. Now they think we're geniuses. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Admiral Zethkar appeared beside them, his arm in a medical sling from injuries sustained during the battle. He had requested this private meeting with Jake, away from the crowds of diplomats and reporters. Captain Morrison, the Admiral said formally, I owe you an apology. My people underestimated yours, and I led my fleet into defeat through arrogance. You're a good officer, Admiral, Jake replied. You just made the mistake of fighting the last war instead of this one. How did you know our tactics so well? You predicted our every move. Jake considered the question carefully. We study history, Admiral. Human military history is full of XA.